What changes when the only nuclear power inside the European Union decides to expand its arsenal and move parts of it beyond its borders? France currently maintains fewer than 300 nuclear warheads, yet its president has now confirmed both an increase in that number and the possibility of temporarily deploying nuclear-armed aircraft to allied nations. In this video, we examine what this shift means for Europe's security architecture, NATO's deterrence model, and the evolving balance of power in a more uncertain transatlantic era. If this policy strengthens European deterrence, it could redefine strategic autonomy inside the EU and reduce dependence on Washington's nuclear umbrella. If it triggers escalation or miscalculation, it may deepen tensions with adversaries and complicate alliance coordination. At stake is the credibility of extended deterrence across a continent that has relied for decades on American nuclear guarantees, while maintaining only two independent nuclear forces of its own. President Emmanuel Macron announced that France would allow the temporary deployment of elements of its strategic air forces to allied countries. The announcement came during a speech at Lille-Longue, the base in northwestern France that hosts the country's ballistic missile submarines. He clarified that while aircraft could be stationed abroad, decision-making authority over the use of nuclear weapons would remain exclusively with the French president. There would be no shared launch authority or joint control mechanisms. France's nuclear doctrine has long been grounded in strategic independence. Since the Cold War, Paris has maintained its force de frappe outside NATO's integrated command structure, even while cooperating politically with the alliance. The arsenal consists primarily of submarine-launched ballistic missiles and air-delivered nuclear weapons carried by strategic bombers and fighter aircraft. The stockpile has remained below 300 warheads for decades, reflecting post-Cold War reductions that began in the early 1990s. Macron stated that he had decided to increase the number of warheads, marking the first expansion since at least 1992. He did not provide a specific figure, but the symbolic significance is clear. Increasing the arsenal signals a recalibration of threat perception. The president framed the decision as necessary to preserve assured destructive capability, emphasizing that deterrence must remain credible under evolving security conditions. The geopolitical backdrop includes recurring tensions between European leaders and US President Donald Trump regarding the durability of American security commitments. For decades, NATO's nuclear umbrella has meant that US strategic forces would defend allied nations if faced with existential threats. Recent political friction has raised doubts in parts of Europe about the reliability of that guarantee. France, as the EU's only nuclear-armed state, occupies a unique position in that debate. Talks have begun with Britain, Germany, Poland, the Netherlands, Belgium, Greece, Sweden, and Denmark regarding potential arrangements. Germany's chancellor acknowledged initial discussions and even suggested that German aircraft could theoretically carry French nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, France and the United Kingdom adopted a joint declaration in July, allowing their independent nuclear forces to be coordinated. The United Kingdom, though no longer an EU member, remains Europe's other nuclear power and a key NATO actor. These developments unfold amid a deteriorating security environment shaped by Russia's war in Ukraine and broader military modernization programs. Russia possesses the world's largest nuclear arsenal, estimated at more than 5,000 warheads. The United States maintains a comparable inventory. France's force is numerically smaller but technologically advanced, centered on submarine-based deterrence designed to ensure second strike capability. Consider the first what-if scenario. If France proceeds with expanded deployments and allied governments agree to host aircraft on a rotational basis, Europe could move toward a more distributed deterrence posture. That arrangement might complicate adversary targeting calculations and reinforce political solidarity. It could also prompt renewed debates within host nations about sovereignty, escalation risks, and public opinion toward nuclear weapons stationed on their soil. Now, consider a second scenario. If adversaries interpret these deployments as escalatory rather than stabilizing, they may respond with countermeasures such as forward positioning of missile systems or intensified military exercises near European borders. Such reactions could narrow crisis decision windows and increase the risk of misinterpretation during periods of tension. Strategic signaling in that environment becomes more delicate. The decision to retain sole launch authority is central to understanding France's approach. Unlike NATO's nuclear sharing arrangements involving US weapons in several European countries, France is not proposing shared custody. The model would resemble extended deterrence without integrated command. That distinction matters legally and politically. It preserves national sovereignty while offering reassurance. European partners have shown varying degrees of interest. Some governments seek deeper engagement with French deterrence discussions, including participation in nuclear exercises. Others remain cautious, mindful of domestic political sensitivities. Public opinion in many European states has historically favored nuclear restraint, yet threat perceptions have shifted since 2022. The increase in warhead numbers also carries arms control implications. Global non-proliferation frameworks have been under strain as major powers modernize arsenals. France's move does not violate treaty obligations, but it signals that reductions are no longer the default trajectory. The broader question is whether this marks a temporary adjustment or the beginning of a sustained upward trend among nuclear states. From a strategic standpoint, deployment flexibility enhances deterrence by demonstrating readiness and alliance cohesion. However, mobility can also blur lines between defensive reassurance and offensive signaling. Military planners must calibrate visibility, ensuring deployments deter without provoking unintended escalation. Watch for concrete indicators in the coming months. Will agreements specify duration and scope of aircraft rotations? Will host countries invest in infrastructure upgrades to accommodate strategic assets? Will Britain deepen operational coordination beyond declaratory statements? These details will determine whether the announcement remains symbolic or evolves into structural transformation. Ultimately, this decision reflects a Europe grappling with uncertainty about the permanence of its security guarantees. Nuclear deterrence operates on perception as much as capability. By expanding its arsenal and offering temporary deployments, France is asserting agency within that psychological domain. The balance between autonomy and alliance will shape the next chapter. Stability depends not only on weapons numbers, but on clarity of purpose and disciplined signaling. Observers should watch whether rhetoric aligns with measured implementation, because in nuclear strategy, credibility is built incrementally and tested rarely, yet its consequences endure for generations.